Hour in the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. And thank you to ActonTV for taping our meeting tonight and making it available on their, to the public on their website. So Diane's unavailable today, so I'm pinch hitting for her. You have a number of sheets on the desk in front of you. The green one is the revised agenda. The pink one is for item 10.1. It's the subcommittee assignments. And the gold one is for item 11.3 in case we need it. Oh, we've skipped all the way to item 3. So Superintendents Report, Peter?
All right, thank you. So I'll just give you a little backstory on the Superintendent's Report. This is a new agenda item this year that Diane and I worked on adding. What I wanted an opportunity to do at each meeting was to update you on just some of the happenings around the district over the previous 2 weeks, just to make sure I can keep you abreast and keep the community abreast of interesting things that may be going on. What I will also be doing is the Superintendent's Report, as well as some of the FYI information that's really pertinent to families, will then be posted the day after the school committee meeting on the superintendent's page of the website. So there'll be a consistent stream of biweekly communications that parents can refer to. We're posting it on the website because then that information can be accessed in a home language by any family in the district. And we'll send out a Power School Bright Arrow message to all families, letting them know that that's there for the biweekly update, just to keep people in the loop. So that's the intent of the Superintendent's Report, just so you have that as well. I will not go through the entire memo because it was in your packet, but I will highlight a few things for you. First, we have a new website. It's very exciting. I just want to make sure I thank Amy Bisowitz for all of the work she did on that. It's an incredible undertaking, and you know, I don't think anyone knew just how much information has been archived on that website, but to be able to transfer it over is monumental. So thank you to Amy and all of her team. There were also a number of staff around the district who worked on that, so I just want to make sure I recognize all of that group. We also recognize as you transfer platforms, sometimes information people may have found easily because they were used to where it was located. That may be a little bit more challenging. We're constantly reviewing that, and I do expect information to shift locations a little bit over the next month or 2 months as we get a better sense of how users need to access information, but we are responsive to that. Beginning of the year communication with families. We started that last week. I sent home kind of a superintendent's introduction to families, and then we followed that with some transportation information because we recognize how important that is for families to understand the new busing schedule. There are new school schedules. We want to emphasize that, and they're included in this packet. And then, JD's going to speak a little bit more to it in depth, so I don't want to go into too much, but I do want to make sure I recognize and thank the transportation department and JD and his team, because to reroute 5,000 plus students where every single one of them has an opportunity to take a bus is Herculean, to say the least, in the massive scope of that project. So he's done a remarkable job, and he is and his staff are really taking time to respond to families' needs, and you'll get an opportunity to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. We want to kind of give a little bit of a public service announcement regarding the Massachusetts primaries, which have been conveniently scheduled for the first day of school. And I think that date was picked with Acton Boxborough in mind, specifically knowing we were changing our school start times, our bus traffic patterns, and it was the first day of school. So we are gearing up for the trifecta. In that regard, John Mangiaretti is the new Acton Town Administrator. He and I are actually preparing a joint press release to be able to send out to the broader Acton community around polling stations in Acton, because we understand that, especially on the campus, is very, very challenging traffic. So he is urging his voters to pick hours that are not around our arrival and dismissal times, and then we're also putting some information about not parking in bus lanes, things like that. But I do expect traffic to be heavily congested, so if there are any voters out there listening, please plan accordingly for the start and end of school. We apologize, but it's unavoidable for us. Our offices have moved. Central administration is now located all in one location. It is 15 Charter Road instead of 16 Charter Road. We're still in process of some of the construction. I expect that to take several more weeks. Once that's over, we do want to have an opportunity to host you as a school committee for a little bit of an open house so you can kind of check out the new digs and see how things are located. I think it'll be a nice opportunity. We'll do that for our staff around the district as well, so people can come visit the new location. It's coming together. Dave Vertolino has done a really nice job leading that, but all of the team have just been critical in making sure that the spaces were done well, done correctly, and I recognize, you know, all of the staff being so flexible while we're under construction. It's challenging. Let's see, we have, next up, I also, again, just want to recognize JD and his team for all of the facilities work that was undertaken. They did almost $1 million in capital projects over the summer, as well as all the normal routines of getting schools cleaned and ready to go at the beginning of the school year, and the administrative building work. Again, monumental undertaking over the summer. You're going to hear a little bit more about the capital projects later tonight, but just a thank you. Senior Leadership Retreat. This was a wonderful opportunity on August 1st and 2nd. We went off-site over to Endicott College, and we had an opportunity to really focus on the work the district has been doing around equity and take a deep dive into some of the equity data of the district. It was also an opportunity for me to introduce myself to the team. The work that we did, you're going to actually see as part of the district's long-range strategic plan update when we present our goals in a few weeks, because we used that as a launching point to look at some data which drove some of our goals for this coming year. We then reconvened with the senior leadership team, but expanded that to include our department heads, various program leaders, and assistant principals across the district on the 8th, where we split up a little bit and we did a little bit of our seed work. We provided some additional training for our assistant principals and department leaders and coordinators, and that will continue for the rest of the year for them. And then the rest of the senior leadership team, who had already done that, actually met, and we did some more work on the transportation program as a team to make sure we were all on board, and again, you'll hear more about that. But then we also focused in on a couple of the things that were on a lot of our minds over the summer. One was kind of the response to the hate-based incident that had happened at the end of last year, and debriefing that as a team, understanding where we all stood on that and what we wanted to do moving forward to support our students and families and really make sure that our community understood that is not the values of our schools. And then the second element of that was really debriefing our student death by suicide over the summer, which was incredibly traumatic for everyone involved, and making sure that we had good supports in place for our students and families and staff as they return to school this fall. So that was really the focus of the equivalent of 3 days that we spent together. It was a great opportunity. We have an incredible leadership team here, and I'm just so fortunate to be able to work with them every day. I highlighted at the bottom, so I want to make sure I thank Marie, Dawn, and Deb. They really did most of the planning for this retreat. They understood I was coming in new, and they had this ready to go. Incredibly thoughtful, well-structured, well-organized. I think everyone came out feeling great about it, so thank you to all three of you. Two more, and then we're done with this. This is a little bit longer tonight, just simply because it's been a long summer, and there's a lot to talk about. Diane Baum, Marie Altieri, and I met with the Fostering Racial Justice Group also this summer, and that was again in response to the hate incident at the high school at the end of the school year, and it was an opportunity for us to be able to listen a little bit to some community perceptions around that incident, and to then be able to share some of the work that we've done as a district over the last few years, and come to kind of some shared understandings of what we wanted to have happen as a result of that. So one of the outcomes we agreed to do was to come back to the Fostering Racial Justice Group in the fall with what we're hoping to do is be able to pull together a student panel to be able to start a discussion with our students leading the way around their perceptions of bias within our communities in schools. So we think that's an exciting opportunity to really continue the long-standing work the district has been doing over the last few years around equity. So we're excited about that. The last update I have for you is around my entry plan, which is included in your packet. I presented this to you at the end of June, so I'm not going to talk a lot about that entry plan. I just wanted to draw your attention to it. This is the final version of the entry plan, although I did receive a couple points of feedback, which I think are really good, and I just want to recognize tonight. So thank you to those of you that emailed me information on this. One piece of feedback was I referred to the open enrollment program that we have with our elementary schools. It's a choice program. That's not the technical term for it, and so I received a little bit of feedback on that, which is actually great. I went back through various policy documents, my meeting notes, and what was interesting is there was no one term that people referred to it as, so it's certainly something I'm going to explore as I go through my entry process. There was also some feedback around adding the high school and district profiles to the list of data and information and documents that I'm looking at, so that will certainly happen. And then the third one was around making sure I included the school improvement plans. It was in my first bullet, but I can see it was listed right after the long-range strategic plan, so, but I will certainly be looking at district and school improvement plans as a piece of that. With that said, you know, it's particularly around the entry plan, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have around that, but that's really the superintendent's update, and I look forward to be able to, you know, speaking with you on a regular basis about the just really awesome things that are happening around the district.
We ready to move on to item 4? Oh, statement of warrants. We have a number of warrants. I'll just list the numbers here and maybe give you the total. For accounts payable, we have warrant 18-026, 18-027PR, 19-001A, 19-001PR, 19-002, 19-002A, 19-002PR, 19-003, and 19-003PR for a total of $8,256,987.77. We have gross payroll number P1827/P1827V, P1901, P1902, and P1903 for a total of $2,713,079.28 for a grand total of $10,970,067.05. So we want to make sure that there are a lot of warrants here, and we just want to make sure everybody signs them before we leave. Okay, we also have minutes in the packet from the school committee workshop that we held on July 16th to approve. And Beth, did you get any comments? So no comments received. We can approve as they are. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes of July 16th.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as read, please say aye. 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 Those opposed say nay. And abstentions? Okay, thank you. The minutes were approved unanimously. Now we move to the time in our agenda where we open for public participation. If there are anyone in the public who would like to speak to items that are not on the agenda, come on and bring them forward now. Seeing none, I'm just going to move on. Item number 6, the FY19 staffing report. We have new staff. Marie, you want to take us through that?
It's making a lot of noise, is that? Hi, everybody. Great to see you. Hope you all are having a wonderful summer. Notice that was present tense, not past tense. This is sort of my favorite thing to put in our school committee packet. Once a year, we get to put in all the information about our new staff, which is so exciting. Yesterday, we had our new teacher orientation, and we have 50 new teachers and 7 new administrators, and we had them all in here and had a really positive, uplifting day of bringing them on board with all their background and experience and new energy into our schools to be our newest educators. It is a big hiring year for us. You can see kind of the data over time, but we've been roughly in the low 30s for new teachers or new teachers and administrators combined over the last many years. And this year we're at 57. There were 47 teachers and 7 administrators in the packet. We've hired 2 since then, and I think we might have 1 more to go. A question that I got was, and I knew it when I wrote it, so I should have just written a sentence to explain it. The newly hired professional staff at the bottom of 54, and that was a snapshot in time as of last Friday. It's not the sum of everything above. So we have over 450 teachers plus administrators and lots of comings and goings. And so sort of the new positions, the positions listed here as retirements, there were 18, leaving the district 22. The leave of absences almost balance out, but there are some new positions and there are some, we call it dominoes. So somebody internally got 1 position and that opened up another position. The 54 are really the number of people. Some of the positions are part-time, some are full-time, sometimes a full-time turns into 2 part-time. So there are lots of ins and outs, and so the intent of this was not to sort of explain all of that, because there are many, many changes. To give you an example, in the list of new staff, Juliana Schneider's listed as the new principal of Merriam, but she was the assistant principal, so that created a vacancy. So in the list of retirements, you see 1, that's the position Juliana took, but then Bryant was hired as the assistant principal at Merriam. A lot of that happens. The transfers that are listed going between schools, some of those are from 1 position to another position, opening up another position, and so on. So, and as you know, we have over 1,000 employees. These are teachers and administrators. So we've hired 56 as of right now, teachers and administrators. We have another 100 or more support staff that we've hired. So it's a pretty large organization. The reason for having so many teachers, we have a few more retirements than we've had historically, and some of our teachers are more mobile than we would have seen in the past in terms of family member going to another part of the country, so the family relocates, those kinds of things. The budget, as you know, for new positions and for retirements, we budget at Master's Step 3, so a 3rd-year teacher with a master's degree, which is roughly $56,000. The average for all of our new staff is $63,000, and yet I say, but with all the hiring, we're within the budget. And the reason for that is really the number of teachers who move around. So I counted in the certified staff not returning, certified staff leave of absence. In those lists, 22 of them came in after the budget. So 22 of the people we replaced were replaced after the budget. So at the time of the budget, we knew most, if not all, of the retirements, and we knew the new positions because they were approved in the budget. But these other 22 folks were budgeted at their salaries, and for one reason or another, they're not here now, and in general are replaced by somebody at a lower salary, sometimes much lower. So that's part of why when we get to budget season, we talk about a vacancy factor. So we budget a fairly large amount of money. I think it's $175,000 for exactly that, because we know that some people are going to leave and the trends are such that we end up with some surplus. In fact, we're probably going to increase the vacancy factor next year because the trend is increasing in terms of the changes in teaching staff. So highly qualified, great group of folks. I think if we're not fully staffed for certified, we're very close. I think we might be fully staffed. A shout out to JD and our two transportation coordinators, Jen and Janice. We are, as of today, have enough people to drive the buses. And so a couple of them might be returning retirees kind of thing, but, and we have a few more who are in the process of getting licensed. And that was, you'll hear more about it, so I probably just stole your thunder, sorry. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I have one question and then have a actually request. So my question is that, I noticed that you're saying that, with many more to come in the next couple of weeks, I mean, more hires, right, new people. Are we going to hire more, like teachers and all other stuff within the next couple of weeks?
So the many more is in reference to support staff, and in general in reference to part-time assistants in some of the schools. So many maybe was an exaggeration, but we do have them coming in along the way. No, teachers are fully staffed. I might have one more coming.
Okay.
But yeah,
okay.
we had one resign last week, so we hired one this week.
Okay.
So this kind of thing happens every year. But no, we don't have many more teachers coming. The teachers are on board, hopefully.
Okay. I have another follow-up question about, you're saying that it's not going to, it's going to be within the budget, right? The FY19 budget. So there's no actual, right? So I guess that with more teachers and stuff adding in, right? So they are paid with a lower salary than those left.
Correct.
So
in some cases.
Does it mean that they're kind of with lower staffs? The teachers, especially.
Can you say it again?
Is it less experienced teachers because of less experienced teachers?
Yes,
so that
yes.
because of that, so we're paying less.
Yeah, if I may, Marie, it sounds to me like we're seeing generally those who are leaving are at higher salaries. We're hiring at a little bit lower, so that would be favorable to the budget. Is that fair?
Yes, exactly
right,
correct.
But it also translates to the more less experienced teachers, right?
Yes,
Is that
that's
right?
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to confirm that. Yeah. Go.
Just one more
Yeah.
comment on that. It's not always that teachers are less experienced.
Uh-huh.
Our salary scale maxes out at step 12, and there could be a teacher who's coming with more than 12 years experience, but because they're coming from outside of the district, they're placed at that step 12 instead as the max.
Oh, I see.
So it could very well be that they're more experienced, but just coming to the district, they're new here, and we can't place them beyond that salary scale.
I see. Okay, thank you. So I have a kind of a request, which, if you could, from the page, for this section, from the page 3, and you will see all the new professional staff and the teachers, their name, their position, means role, and also their salary staffs, and also FTE. So, but I want to say, the same for the teachers and the staff. They retired and then they left for the last year. So you're adding new to replace the teachers and the staff who left, either retired or just, maybe thinking new careers, right? So, and then you list all the new ones, right? With name, position, and salary staff, and FTE.
So,
right? I hope we can see the same for the one. Yeah.
It sounds to me like we're getting a little into the weeds on that. If you want to articulate that into an email to Peter.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, all right, thank you.
I just want to recognize the enormous amount of work that had to go into all of that hiring, all of the interviewing, and all of the onboarding. And so I'd like to thank Marie and her team and all the people who supported that.
Yeah, I also want to recognize this is a tremendous effort into, every year that our students benefit the most from hiring the best teachers. I really appreciate all the work that's putting in. And this is more of a process question because I wasn't in from last year when we decided the budget. Maybe this can be explained in of the number of hours that you just explained. So when we decided on the budget, do we just decide an overall budget and we are not deciding the number of the teachers? Because from what I saw on the number, we did add new staff this year. And that's on top of the number from last year. So was that be part of the discussion last year, or should that be considered a part of discussion, or that's also just covered by the overall budget?
So Angie, it's absolutely discussed. So any new positions are outlined and approved by the school committee, and at that time we show you positions added, positions reduced, where they are, the FTE, the cost, and all of that. So absolutely.
I mean, retirees happen every year. We don't approve those. They just happen. We do the best to anticipate what we might expect from that, but that's the art of creating the budget. But there's a science to creating the budget, which factors in the vacancy factor, what courses we're offering, feedback from principals. So there's quite a bit of work that goes into that.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. And another category, did we discuss what type of teacher or category of the personnel that will be added during the budget process?
Yes, absolutely. So the whole budget Saturday was going over anything like that in detail and explaining the reasoning. Off the top of my head, we added 2 special educators and 1 English language teacher. And a literacy coordinator and a STEM curriculum coach. And we finished the strings. So that was just about it. So that's 4 or 5 new FTE related to teaching.
Okay, so pretty much what's added is in compliance what was discussed, because I do notice our 10 special need teachers was added, so that was included in the budget process.
And only 2 of them were new. So special educators is a very high needs hiring area, and I'm shocked that we're hiring 10 special educators. Last year we hired 6 or 7, and it happens to be an area that seems to have a lot of turnover. So we've had some leave and so on, but I'm pretty sure only 2 of them are new. So
and
5 special educators retired, is that? Oh, thank you, Dawn.
And Angie, just so Marie mentioned a budget Saturday. That budget Saturday is a culmination of a number of months' worth of budget discussion by the budget subcommittee and by senior leadership principals. That there's a lot of work again that goes into generating up what staff do we need for next year, and that all comes together on budget Saturday where each department comes and presents. This is what we need for next year. We try to minimize surprises. Not to say they don't happen. I remember a couple of years ago, all of a sudden, there were 6 special education kids in special education that we came late that we didn't anticipate, and now what do we do with them? They're our responsibility. We ended up having to go off-site and do all kinds of stuff, but I mean, to the extent that we can manage, we do.
Thank you for clarification.
So I almost don't want to say anything until I noticed the number here. We can see from 2015, 2016, 2017, this 3 year, the new hire number from 29 to 30, 33. It's not surprising, but however, for this year, 2018, we see the adding is 21. You know, it's almost 80%, even over 80% of the new hire. More than 80% of the new hires in 2017. I totally understand that there are something. I remember when my kids are all in Gates School, 1 year there are 5 retire. I mean, the teacher gets retired at 5. All 5 of them gets retired for that 1 year. I don't know if that could be the case. Some of them could be the case. Like, I mean, not this year, right? I mean, the year before, but some similar case could happen to 2018. Like a lot of teacher gets retired in that year. But however, that 21, the number really make me concerned. Because I heard some case back to March or April, maybe February, I forgot. Their freshman high school English teacher, one class gets changed, the teacher, you know, replaced several times in that whole 6 months, back from last year, September. It's 2018 to, let's see, start 2018 September, all the way, I'm sorry, not 2018, 2017 September, all the way to 2018 June. That freshman high school English teacher replaced 3 or 4 times. So I totally agree with Mary and Angie. They said, think about 54 teachers and you need to hire them. Interview what could be that really tremendous process. However, there is something, if there is some concerns, when we doing I don't know exactly the new hire process, and if Marie have time share with us, you know, off the line, that would be really great. So I don't know how that number, you know, for 2018 it's jumped so huge. But I don't necessarily want to know now. That's okay.
Okay, there was a lot there, Eileen. So there are a few more retirements. There are several more sort of folks who left the district. And, you know, I always sort of analyze the why around it. And like I said, a lot of it's family relocating. Some of it were staffing issues. But if you send me an email offline or send it to Peter, I can't think of a teacher who would have been replaced 3 or 4 times in the course of last year.
You can ask.
So don't, I'd rather not have you name names, but we can take that offline. So one of the things that's happening that the committee should be aware of, those of you who have been here know, there's a contractual change coming through in which there's something called the early retirement incentive that's available to teachers when they retire. It's being phased out. And so fewer and fewer, some teachers who are retiring don't qualify for it anymore, and so they don't have to tell us by December 15th. So in order to get the early retirement incentive, they have to notify us by December 15th. So one of the things that happened is after those who don't get the early retirement incentive may have chosen to wait and tell us later. So that's something that affected the budget a bit. And it is going away permanently in the next 3 years. So it's decreasing every year and being eliminated. I expect to see large numbers of retirees over the next 3 years. I think that's going to incentivize folks who are kind of on the fence, who might go sooner. So that's part of it. Other than that, there isn't a huge sort of change in behavior, if you will, but we'll continue to watch it. And I'm happy to respond about that particular position. We definitely do not see people coming and going in the middle of the year unless it's, medical reasons or an occasional personnel issue, or performance issue.
All right, thank you.
Okay, ready to move on to item 7. We got the transportation update, and I see JD is on stage right.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. We'll jump right in. What am I doing here? There we go. All right, so we're going to start this no matter what. So we better be ready. To pick up. To pick up on the staffing theme, it's funny, actually, literally 15 minutes before I walked into this room, I got a phone call that one of the people we hired is not coming. So you'll see 36 licensed drivers there. We're down to 35. But again, that doesn't affect our ability to roll like tomorrow if we had to. We have that worked out. But just to kind of put that in perspective, we needed 8 additional FTE to pull off the single tier model. But that was actually 11 bus drivers for us because we had 2 retire and 1 relocate. So that's kind of where our delta was to start this year. So we've done a pretty good job with that. We found drivers using Indeed, which we've always have been searching for like where these folks are hanging out, and one of our transportation co-managers, Jim Lasham, put up a free announcement on Indeed one day, and we had like 9 hits the next day, and that was great. A lot of them need training, and we've brought them in and talked to them, and we think we have a few that are worth pursuing, and they're all in various stages of training right now. And like I said, we could run it tomorrow if we had to. We wouldn't like to continue running that like through all of September, but if we have to, we would. So back to the beginning, all of our buses have been purchased. They're numbered, they're inspected, they're registered. They have our communication systems in them. They have the AV systems in them. So we're ready to roll physically from the bus perspective. The total cost for this implementation is still trending under the $750,000 that we had originally budgeted for that. I'm sure we'll be able to reconcile all that information in one of the upcoming budget presentations through the fall. The routes are created, they've been published. I talked about driver hiring. And one of the things we've been really trying to focus on this year is communication with the community. Peter sent out the update letter a week or 2 ago, and accompanied that was the FAQ document that we worked on. And the website has been kind of fully redesigned, which seems to be working based on the information we're getting in from the community. We're trying to have a strong focus this year on safety, specifically kind of human management, if you will, with the bus drivers, which is something that we do a lot of training around, safe railroad crossings and bus evacuations and things like that. One of the things that we haven't put a lot of time in is simple things around student management, de-escalation strategies and whatnot. So on September 20th, we're having a de-escalation seminar that's actually being run by the insurance company, which is nice because then we get credits on our overall insurance at the end of the year, which sometimes comes in to be tens of thousands of dollars in savings for the district. So that's great. We've built out a new training room in the facilities module next to Leary Field. We're working very, very closely with the principals to create better relationships and just interpersonal dynamics between like the assistant principals who do a lot of work with the bus drivers around behavioral issues on the buses. We know the buses are going to be a little bit more crowded, so we just want to be prepared for everything we can there. And we certainly have a focus on route safety and bus stop safety because that's has been changed a lot this year. And kind of to delve into that a little bit more, we created a new process for community members to request an evaluation of their bus stop. So that's a link on our webpage. They submit to this email address which goes to us in the office. We have a Google form that myself and Detective Chris Prail and Boxborough Police would have access to if they needed it. So we can do the evaluations, fill out the information, and then it's all readily available for people to see in a very transparent way. So we'll be working the same as we always have in concert with the police. As of this afternoon, we had 47 requests in that area. So to put that in perspective, that's about 3%, right? So there's about 1,500 bus stops. And many of these are just, don't necessarily have such a safety component to them. It might just be, can I move here instead of here, or, for no other reason than family convenience or whatever. Which I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, it's part of the business. So that's really it. I'm happy to answer any questions about transportation.
I have a question because I just watched your presentation. It was great. It was great. Especially I like the last page that we try to increase the process and also the transparency. So, but one thing I want to point out is that last year, winter, very cold days, and then a lot of students, they had experience that, and also the parents, they had experience that they were standing in the street waiting for the bus, and then bus didn't come. And then they didn't find out until after maybe waiting for 10, 15, 30 minutes, right, outside, cold days. So how do we want to improve that?
So I remember the first day back to school from winter vacation very well. It was a great day. But in the update I gave to the committee in June, I believe, we actually talked a little bit about one of the communication strategies we had that we're going to be able to implement next year is kind of coding out Bright Arrow, if you will, which is an email system which will be able to blast to very specific routes and families, for very specific issues. So we hope that would be a large benefit in terms of being able to select and send information out very quickly in one lump sum way. Prior to that, the only means we had is to start dialing people off the list, right, off of the route list. And on that day in particular, we were all out there, doing that, so there wasn't really anyone available to make those calls. But we're hopeful that this new capability will really help and add a benefit to families in that regard, because that's the last thing we want to.
I just want to give the real good compliments on the new website. I don't know how many of you actually use it. I did it, and I love it. And it's really good. And the form in terms of giving feedback is really great transparency, has a great transparency. It's very easy to use. So for people who haven't used it, go on there. You'll love it. So that's really great. And just thought about the, and Michael just mentioned me, I have one recommendation to kind of maybe back to Peter, which is, I remember years back there was an absolute temperature kind of cold out, so because kids can get frostbite in certain temperature, and if they waited there for long enough, they can have frostbite. I remember years back there was an absolute temperature that if you hit that, it's automatic. The kids, you don't have to go out to wait. So I just want to make a recommendation to think, in terms of communication, something like that, they maybe consider. Thank you.
So JD, I hate to do this, but I have to do this. So last year we heard from 2 groups of parents on those cul-de-sacs.
Yep.
Are those, how have those 2 been treated in particular? Have those routes changed at all?
They have not.
They have not.
No, we believe those are safe stops. Yeah.
Thank you.
As does the police. Please.
Sorry, getting used to pressing the button here. I think it's interesting because it came out as a cul-de-sac issue, but I think, I'm trying to reframe it as a broader issue, that anytime a parent has a concern about a bus stop, we're going to evaluate that thoroughly. It doesn't matter whether it's on a cul-de-sac, on Route 27, on a back road, whatever that issue is, we just need to make sure every bus stop we have is safe. And so I think there was a change that we went into cul-de-sacs previously, and we may not be now, but the real issue is, how do we know our bus stops are safe? And I think that's what JD and his team have really worked on, is to make sure that they're doing a thorough evaluation each time, so that when we do evaluate that, and when the police evaluate it, we can come back to a family and say, yes, this is the process we've used, here's what we've looked at, and here's how we've determined that it's safe.
I just have to say, for those in particular, they had reports about accidents that were happening right at those places. And so it feels like, I honestly question the safety myself without having gone out there. And so I think it's hard for them to hear, despite all this, it's safe. So it's hard to know what are the criteria. Is it 10 accidents have to happen, or, before it's considered safe, or not safe?
I think that's a great point. I think it also depends on, the nature of the accidents that occur. There's quantitative data in terms of a number of issues that could arise, but then I think the police are best equipped to look at what those issues are, and then be able to come back and say, no, this was something that was not related to the safety of an area or a stop. So I think there comes a point in time when we really just rely on our experts at the police force to evaluate that and be able to make that determination. I know it may not be what every family wants to hear, but I think the important piece is to be consistent in our evaluation process, and when we do have to deliver some information to a family, to make sure that we're transparent in how we've evaluated it.
And I know I actually did go out there, but it was, clear day, no snow, and I just have to rely on those who are more versed in evaluating that kind of thing. But JD, I did have a question for you. You mentioned the blast to get to certain groups.
Yes.
Is that a text or is that email?
Email.
Is that, okay.
Yeah. Actually, could that go by text? Is the answer to that? Yeah.
Or phone call.
Yeah.
Or phone.
It can be it's replaced Connect Ed for us, so it
Right.
comes out of Power School, and it's
So
a
as a
broadcast.
parent myself who is willing to accept text messages, is that how the provisions? Oh, hey.
So is that operational this school year? You said
Yep.
next year, but I didn't know if you were saying last year, you said next year.
No, we plan to be using that this school year.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Because Michael's child and mine are on the same route.
Yeah.
This is just a functional question. It may differ across the board, but a question I saw from a lot of parents, and I can see now that the afternoon times are updated, but is there any generality in terms of whether or not a route runs exactly the same way, or if it goes reverse? Or does it just really depend on the route?
You want to try and make it reverse, right, if you can. Now, are situations that interfere with that, whether it might be a need for a door-side pickup, so there's other extenuating factors, but what we generally try and do to create that equity, that's usually what the question's about, is to try and do them in reverse.
So just one final comment on transportation, because I want to be transparent about some of the issues that we're hearing. One of the issues that comes up that I've been privy to a number of emails on is around the length of the bus trip. And I think it's a challenge for some families and students, especially, the handful that are impacted where they might be at the longer side of those bus routes. We are hearing concerns from families who did end up at that 45-minute time limit or 40-minute time limit. I really do empathize with them. I know what JD and his team did because, before we released this, I went over and they walked me through how they assigned routes. They use a pretty high-tech system called TransFinder, and it will actually map out the shortest route. And so we do have some requests where people have asked us to reroute things so that it might be shorter for their child. Unfortunately, when we look at it, if we try to reroute it, it ends up lengthening the trip for a number of students. In fact, it lengthens the trip for all students on the bus. I feel very, very badly about that. I understand how people feel about it. Unfortunately, it's just not something that we're always able to do. So JD does look at that with his team. He looks at how we can create the shortest routes. If it's possible, we could shorten it, but that's just not always the case. And so I think that's the other element that sometimes people ask for additional bus stops because of that. We just have to also consider that every bus stop we add increases time on buses for kids, and we're already, pushing that time limit. So I just want to make sure you understand, because you certainly will hear about it in the community, and I know it's going to be a point of discussion for some families, but we're trying to be responsive, but we also have some limits based on the total route time. Paul, Marie.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. First of all, thank you to JD and Jen and Janice. They've been unbelievable. They have completely recreated the busing system. I just want us all to remember that, so the elementary buses in particular are going to have many more kids on them than they've had in the past. In the past, they were actually quite utilized. And the routes are going to be longer. So the buses are going to go through more neighborhoods than they may have gone through before. It's a very different system. The benefit to this is later start times for junior high and high school and a single schedule for elementary. So it's not going to go back and forth every year. So once we iron out the first 2 or 3 weeks, which, you get used to a lot of things happening at the beginning of the year and then it smooths out. The benefit is later start times for junior high and high school and a single schedule for elementary. So the routes will be longer, the buses will be more crowded, we're not going down as many cul-de-sacs, there may not be as many frequent stops, but the benefit for student learning and student wellness is significant.
Eileen.
I definitely want to thank JD for this whole, and his team for this whole process, and it's very wonderful. Just like Marie said, I echo for that. So we definitely like the one-tier bus system than two, and switch around every year. And when the kids went to some other town before, there is nobody heard late schedule, early schedule other than Acton for many years. That's very, very wonderful. But I do check the bus route last night, and really see some bus running probably around 45 minutes, 50 minutes. So, so my understanding is I'm with Marie and with JD, no problem for this year. But I'm thinking after this year's experience, probably if some bus still running very slow for a town like Acton and Boxborough, the kids needs to be, especially elementary kids, need to be on the bus for over 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Is, I don't know if it's our task to think about our budget. Increase our budget to add a little bit more buses to solve the problem. Not a lot, because you don't want to give a lot of traffic or whatever, but that's just depend on how JD decided those things. And I really have a little bit concern for very long time bus rider. Ride time. But we have to move on, right? Just as what we discussed for that, thank everybody for all those efforts.
And just to clarify too, we, if we do have buses that consistently run in a situation where an individual is over 45 minutes, like we don't leave it that way. We'll make adjustments and try and fix it the best we can until we get those down so that we're staying within those parameters. And if you're ever curious to see what 30-minute limits look like, that's something we can plug into our software system and it'll spit out how many buses you need for that, so that's certainly something that could be produced for the committee.
No more questions? We can move on to the
Switch it.
item 8, capital projects update. JD, don't go.
I'm not going anywhere. So just really quickly, just want to give you guys an update on kind of where we stand with a lot of the summer capital projects. We are in pretty good shape. That's the auditorium, and that is staging so that you can literally stand up and just reach the ceiling. So the entire auditorium was staged, and all of the plaster on that ceiling that was starting to crumble and fall was physically removed and scraped off, and then it was replastered. So that is that was a very large project, and the thing I sweated the most, I'm happy to tell Peter that the scaffolding as of today is out of there, and I think we're going to be okay on Wednesday. So yeah. Now I might get fired over the light replacement, but we're targeting the home opener for football is the September 14th. We feel positive we're going to be able to complete that project by then. We had some permitting issues in the beginning, which meant for us that we lost our crew that was scheduled to be here. So we have a delay in that lighting project at Leary Field. All the equipment's here, and it should go up relatively quickly at this point. Like I said, the high school auditorium ceiling's complete. We fixed if you recall, the brick sills at the Parker Damon building. There was an issue with that construction where water would kind of sheet flow down the building and just sit on those brick sills, and over time has kind of rotten away that mortar that held those bricks together, and then created some leaking. We actually fixed those by putting bluestone on top of the sills, and all that work is complete. And this, the brick sill work and the auditorium ceiling work has come in very significantly under budget. So we have had some surplus there that we were able to put into paving. So many of you probably noticed the paving work. We're hopeful to work on all of campus over the next 3 years, kind of phasing that in. We had a crew here on campus and also at Blanchard. You see the parking overflow at the bottom. We did that work, and then we were able to channel, while the crew was here, mobilize to channel funds to do more and additional, and that's been successful, and that's totally complete. The high school Commons C, I actually don't have a lot to do with, but I put it on here. It's a large capital project. Karen Altericio at the high school has pretty much been managing that, and it looks great. If anyone has walked through there, it's a really nice addition and should soften that high school nicely, which is one of our goals around student wellness. There's some wood rot on some sills and windows around the junior high school, especially around the Blanchard gymnasium and the fitness center. We haven't completed that at all. That's something that we can do while school's in session, and the other things that we couldn't do while school was in session, we try to prioritize those. Moving on, we're designing DDC controls, basically taking out pneumatic controls at Blanchard and installing electrical controls, which allows us to do a great deal of work in programming and scheduling the HVAC system there. and pneumatic controls are just very, very antiquated and expensive to maintain. So we're doing that design, and hopefully that'll feed into our budget process in the next couple months. We did a acoustical project at the cafeteria here at the junior high school to try and reduce the overall decibel level in that space. That's complete and it seems to have been effective, but we'll look forward to seeing on that first day of school what the noise level is like in there. We completed all the flooring at Parker Damon building, primarily on the McCarthy Town side. So that building has been completely changed out over the last about 5 years. There's still a couple of spaces left at Merriam where they had summer programs this year, but we'll hit those next summer, and then we'll turn our attention to the junior high school and then the high school. The PA system at the junior high was upgraded. A kiln was installed at Conant, and we're still working through the admin building moves and renovation. And we never really had an original budget target for that for this summer. But if Peter or David want to add anything to that, that'd be great. But that's kind of where we are on the summer projects. It's well over $1 million of capital improvements.
So, because why I'm saying that percentage complete 25, 70%, 65%. So, going forward, can we consider, because the last time when we revealed the 5-year capital plan, and I also suggested, going with phase by phase. And then we can talk about, the percentage in the phase, right? In that way, so it'll be easier to present year over year, right?
Sure.
So yeah, that's my just suggestion. So thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Paul, okay if I do it from here? I've got a lot of papers to... Thanks. Whatever floats now. Yes, they're going up presently.
Behind the curtain.
Hang on. Of course. Thank you. Thank you. You received materials electronically before the meeting, including the items from the regular quarterly reports, which consist of an overview with an E&D projection as of July 1st, revenue and expenditure analyses, and when you look at those, note that I included a column with data from the third quarter report and explained significant differences between the third quarter and the year-end projections, because there was a lot of movement in the fourth quarter. Excuse me. There's also a 3-page memo that discusses significant budget to actual expense variances for the entire year. Some of the explanations in the notes between Q3 and Q4 and the memo, which is the whole year budget to actual, are a bit redundant, as in several cases the majority of the variances manifested themselves toward the end of the year, and more about this in a bit. In addition to the reports that you received are reports on special revenue, revolving, and grant funds, which are activity summaries by individual funds in those categories. And finally, a preliminary look at FY 2019 revenues versus budget. Those reports were sent to you, so you've had time to review them. I'll be happy to answer questions, but rather than go page by page, I put together a brief PowerPoint that I believe summarizes where things are. This one is, as it says, an overview of the finances for the year. Both revenue and expenditure variances seem a lot, and they are, but when you consider variances on a percentage basis on an $86 million budget, I believe you can see it can get risky if we try to be too aggressive with district budgeting. I'll discuss revenues and expenditures separately in a minute, but first a few comments about the big picture. There's very similar overall results between FY17 and FY18, and even many of the categories of revenues and expenditures. I think a lot of that can be attributed to my predecessor, Claire Janot. I'm not being critical of her. As you'll see in a familiar-looking slide upcoming, the district's in a very enviable fiscal condition. But perhaps because we have this safety net of such good health, I think there's an opportunity to budget certain line items a bit less conservatively in the future. I also believe we have an obligation to refine our system of projecting year-end costs. It's a necessary initiative to ensure credibility of my department's financial reports and stewardship of the financial management of a large district that affects the communities of Acton and Boxborough. So the net surplus, as you see, is just about the same between years, both just under 2% when you add revenues and expenditure variances together. I'm going to use this net surplus in an analysis of E&D later in this presentation. The actual E&D amount is, of course, subject to the year-end closing process and audit adjustments, but I don't think it's going to vary far from the amount that I've shown here. As you can see by the footnote, the district might be in line for additional FY18, that's not a typo, FY18 funding as a part of a $150 million supplemental funding bill that the governor filed in July. That's why we have had no information about this in advance. Among other items, including competitive grants, what this could mean to the district is another $12.5 million in circuit breaker funding statewide would be about $100,000 in my view for Acton Boxborough, and about $7 million in additional regional transportation reimbursement statewide would be about $150,000 for Acton Boxborough. That's what's out there. The legislature did not vote on it before ending its formal session. In order to pass, they would have to reconvene in formal session, which is considered unlikely, or bring up the bill in an informal session where it would have to pass unanimously, and that's possible. The most likely time frame for that, though, would be after the primaries on September 4th. Right, Peter? On September 4th. So I'll keep you posted in the event of news about this. So before we move on, as we descend toward Earth, any questions about the big picture? Let's look at variances in the category of the district's revenue. I'm sorry.
So when you say that additional revenue is possible, it sounds like it's possible, but not necessarily likely. Because it depends on the vote, is that what you're saying?
So, a couple of things. It's an election year. The governor proposed additional funding of $150 million. That's a very sizable amount of money. If you follow state revenues, they ended the year in very good shape. They put money into the rainy day fund, and he saw his way clear to doing a lot of things with public safety and security, counseling grants, things like that, that were identified as needs. And those are all in his bill. There are about 30 different line items in his bill, including circuit breaker and including transportation aid. If it comes up in an informal session, what happens, and I've not seen it, but I've just been told what happens, they would present the bill, and without objection, it's passed. But since it's in an informal session, if one legislator objects, it doesn't pass, because unless they go back into formal session, which is, as I said, unlikely. Does it make it unlikely because the size of it? I don't know. Does it make it more likely because it's an election year and nobody wants to be the one who put the kibosh on more money for their districts? Maybe. So all I can tell you is in the next couple weeks we should know a little bit more. And I've been trying to get information. I've spoken with Senator's aide that I'm friendly with. He gave me the outline for the process that I just read to you, and that's the extent of what I have. I know people pretty well connected that did not even know that much. So it's a little bit under the surface.
So you'll keep us updated?
I will. Okay, revenues. What I put up there are the categories that had significant variances. Foundation aid and transportation aid, the first two, go by Chapter 70 and Chapter 71. I think for AB, you're familiar with calling foundation aid Chapter 70. You're familiar with calling Chapter 71 transportation aid. I'll try to not be as nerdy about what I use for the categories going forward, but the variances, I'll just explain briefly. Foundation, the Chapter 70 aid, we've budgeted for a couple of years the minimum. The Acton Boxborough only receives increases in the form of minimum aid from year to year. We budgeted $20 per pupil each year, and for the last 2 years, the legislature has voted an increase of $30. That's the difference, and for FY18, I reported that to you, I believe, in the first quarter of the year, and that's carried through the entire year. Transportation aid is a reimbursement based on the prior year's eligible expenditures for transportation times an estimated rate. When the cherry sheet is released with the governor's budget each January, that's when the preliminary estimate comes out. But the rate is often adjusted at the end of the year, which was the case this year, raising the rate from about 66% to 71.3%. This adjustment was made known on June 29th, and the supplemental budget that we've just been talking about for the last few minutes carries an effective reimbursement rate of 80%, according to the Associate Commissioner of DESE, who was a speaker at a seminar I attended a few weeks ago. That would be unprecedented, in my opinion, to go to 80%. But this variance is the most recent information, the update on June 29th to 71.3%, and it's a significant variance for FY 2018 for AB. Medicaid is another government cost reimbursement program. This time it's the federal government. It reimburses districts who submit indirect cost information relating to medical services provided to students. AB has used the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative for the last 3 years to compile and submit the cost reports, which are extremely complex, and hence why we sub out that work. The collaborative has done an excellent job of maximizing reimbursable costs identified on the report, and the reports that are submitted, and the district's reimbursement has grown substantially during those past 3 years. From a budgetary standpoint, we've been chasing the growth in actual reimbursement revenue. Until 2018, the district did not budget any revenue, and last year conservatively budgeted, got to change devices here, conservatively budgeted $100,000. We received a very large payment in June, which accounts for a significant overall variance for the year, but as you can see, we finally budget something, we budget 100, we get in 275, so we're chasing it, and I'll talk about what we did in FY19 in a few minutes. Investment earnings have never been budgeted by AB, at least not in the relevant history, and certainly not during full regionalization. As a revenue source, that was the case because, presumably because rates were so low that earnings were insignificant. But rates did rise, I'm sure you're aware of that, during FY18. Between that and having an increasingly larger E&D balance to invest, you see the result. So we budgeted zero, we made almost $200,000, and it's about $100,000 more than we made last year. So the $100,000 difference in the years is due to increased rates and having more money to invest. The district's largest revenue source by far, so this doesn't, obviously these columns don't add up to the totals. The largest revenue source by far is not on this slide because the regional assessment, about 80% of the total, is fully collected as issued. Questions on revenues before I advance the slide? Yes, Adam?
I think you said you were going to talk about the Medicaid briefly, but I think my question is, are we going to continue to see that we're chasing that because we're seeing a higher population that is eligible for Medicaid?
As I understand it, Don, do you want to nod if you want to weigh in on this? As I understand it, this is reimbursement for indirect costs. And so I can't, I'm sorry? It's both direct and indirect. And so if we have more, it can vary between years. A lot of the cost structure is based on things that you wouldn't think had anything to do with providing services like capital investment of the district. We get a very tiny fraction of that as an indirect cost reimbursement. Those things kind of get built in as the reports are processed similarly from year to year. I've talked to the person at Lower Pioneer, and they think we've not plateaued and are going to go down. They think it's a pretty stable amount. Okay. Expenditures on the screen are the major budget categories with their budget variations for both FY18 and FY17. The memo I provided to you goes into some detail to explain the nature of those variances, so I won't repeat them with this presentation, but I can answer questions about them. There are two noteworthy comments I do want to make. First, it's remarkable to me that the variances, with one exception, align very closely between years, both in nature, that being positive or negative, and the amount. So you see 350, 550, 200, 400, fairly large negatives, skip that one. Large, large, large. So the variances are very close between years. I believe that attests to how systemically conservative the district has been in both budgeting and projecting cost centers in these categories. Marie and I have already discussed how to approach a solution to better forecast these costs, and that will be a focus of my department's work during this year as we project this current year's costs and budget for those of FY 2020. Just to be clear, it would be impossible to do and foolhardy to try to be exact in projecting and budgeting district expenditures. There's too much risk of some of the cost centers being volatile. If we fall short, we would have to come up with that money at an unforeseen point in time. But now that I have a year's worth of experience and observation under my belt, I think there are some fundamental changes we can make on how this process takes place. The one exception that I talked about is this one here, tuitions, including circuit breaker. So this is the gross amount of tuition cost for the year, including what was paid for by circuit breaker. I had reported, so there was a $500,000 swing between years. In FY 2017, we were down 130. In FY 18, we're up 366. I reported during the first quarter of FY 18 that we had one instance of a child exiting a high-cost program that saved the district over $300,000. On top of that, the Student Services Department, in my view, does an outstanding job of attempting to minimize out-of-district costs through IEP administration and creating equivalent or better programs in the district. And that, I believe, it's a very large number, $8 million. It's a significantly large number of students, each of whom has a big ticket attached to his or her services that are required. When there is volatility, it's often a couple in, a couple out. Sometimes it's a couple in, period. We experienced overall a small positive variance for the year, including that one significant move out. What isn't shown here is circuit breaker, which is considered a special fund. Circuit breaker costs are in the budget and actual numbers I've shown, but what you don't have is a variance or a fund balance. That's in the special fund report that I gave you. I included a table in my memo to show the activity in circuit breaker for FY18 for your information. The fund began the year with a little over 1.6 million and ended with just over 2 million. That 2 million will be spent in its entirety in FY19 as required by state law. If the state does provide additional FY18 circuit breaker, as we talked about before in the budget closeout, we would also need to expend that in FY19, and that would provide some cushion in the event of unforeseen special ed costs. Questions before I move on from expenditures?
So I just heard that we would have to expend the transportation in this year, or
Circuit breaker.
circuit breaker. Is that true for the other item that we expect revenue windfall?
No.
Okay.
No. Transportation aid is a general revenue. It goes into the pot. It can be spent or not. It loses its character once it's received by the town, and it's just in the funds, and if there's money left over, it goes into E&D, but it's not that amount of money specifically. It's just the net goes into E&D. Circuit breaker is accounted for separately.
Yeah.
And can only be held for 1 year.
Right, okay, got it.
This slide, I think, speaks for itself, and the statement that the district has earned its favorable bond rating guidance since full regionalization, going from about $1 million 4 years ago, steadily up by $1 million a year to where it sits now. Note that both of the last 2 years, there's been a 4.7% balance, and the percentage is calculated on the following year's budget. I've shown you the activity in E&D, and so as you know, and we've talked about these in the quarterly reports, the district has made a couple of expenditures out of E&D, one for the feasibility study, the second to defray the FY19 budget, and the add to E&D is the unaudited amount that I showed on a previous slide. The statutory limit, or 5% of next year's budget, is $4.436 million. We're close. If the additional state money does materialize in the amounts that I spoke to you before, only the transportation aid would impact E&D, and we'd still be below the max of 5%.
So a number of years ago, we created a transportation account where we can take extra revenue and put it in there. And I don't believe it counts towards E&D, but I'd like to know, does it count towards E&D? And if it doesn't, should we consider moving some funds into that account, especially if these new dollars come through?
I was asked, so I'll give you my answer, and I think there are two answers to it. One is a technical answer, and one is a political answer. So technically, could you do it? Sure, you could. You can create a reserve of a different flavor and put money into it. I believe it does not count toward E&D. I think if it did, there would be no point for a region in doing that. So I think it would be assumed on my part that it would not count toward E&D. Politically, would you want to do that? That would be up to you whether you thought it was prudent to put money aside in another reserve. And so you're getting, what I mean by that, Mary, is it's clear that you're getting close to the ceiling. If you pull something out so that you don't hit the ceiling and put it over there, is that considered prudent management, or is it considered a way of not reducing member assessments?
Right, but it wouldn't be just to do it. So like we are in a year where we're in a brand new, single elementary tier busing. If in this first year we observe that we need 1 or 2 extra buses, that would be a great resource to fund it in the 19 budget, because in that year we wouldn't get any state reimbursement on it. It's the subsequent year. So that would actually help us to realize that if we thought we needed it. So it gives us a little flexibility there.
There's no question.
Just to add on that, I wasn't thinking of that particular example, but a few years ago we had 9 C cuts in the middle of the year, and that kind of an account would be very helpful.
Do we have the balance right now in that transportation account? Because Mara was talking about
balance.
No.
It's never been funded.
We never funded.
Okay, all right.
But So while I'm at it, another idea I'm thinking of is that investment money, that's a sizable amount of money, and it's variable, so I get a little nervous depending on it, but to me, that might be an amount we consider increasing our OPEB contribution. You know, each year look at what it is, and maybe the subsequent year increase it by the previous years, because we have a huge liability there. The towns, especially because of full regionalization, are actually much better on their OPEB liability, but because of full regionalization, we took in all of the Acton Public, the Blanchard teachers, and so our liability's big. We've been doing a nice job, but we're still, you know, it's drops in a huge puddle. So.
That's true. So I guess from my standpoint, my reaction to your questions, there are some strategic opportunities that being close to the ceiling presents to you. I came from a district where 10 or so years ago, we had to cut 40 positions, and that's not fun. When you're in a position of strength and you're looking for a way to just ratchet that down a little bit so that you don't go too far over where you're allowed to go, that's a much more positive process. And so strategically, I guess administration and school committee should work on, should collaborate on some ideas.
We also have, you know, we talk about our capital buckets, and we have a bucket that's sizable, $10, $12 million, that we don't have anywhere in our planning. And so, you know, although I don't want to needlessly raise assessments in the towns, there's still a lot of things that need to happen in the district, and it's not going to be, you know, give money back time or, you know, reduce the budget dramatically time. I think there's still a lot that needs to happen with the resources we have.
You're right. The things that are still out there as needs are not small dollars at all.
Right.
And I like the creativity that I'm hearing for these ideas on what to do.
Just very quickly, I'll let you read the highlights from the other funds. These are the revolving special funds and grant funds, the printouts that appear in your packets. You can see that the expenditures from year to year are about the same. Noteworthy that there's no individual negative fund balances. We've got the E&D funded the Douglas Building Fund now. The Leary Field project, the one that hopefully will not cost JD his job, that was subsidized by Community Ed because of its good financial position, and the Dining Commons upgrade is done, and the grants are scheduled to be done on time and filed. I put this up there just as a last time. This slide was in my presentation at this time last year, and it talked about the year that was about to happen and the budget strategies that that the district was following this past year. And I give a thumbs up on all counts, and that is why we're in such enviable financial position. One last item. Noteworthy that the operating budget for FY19 decreased from a 3.6% increase to a 3.06% increase. And so, where are we in FY19? The cartoon of me holding a bag of money isn't flaunting anything. It's just an observation that out of the box, that is me, can't you tell?
Yes.
Out of the box in FY19, all of the news so far is positive. Chapter 70, again, we budgeted $20 per pupil. Again, they voted $30 per pupil. Regional transportation aid, we level funded that revenue from 18 to 19 as reimbursement aid levels had been waning in recent years. But when the revised cherry sheet was made public in June, it was a very pleasant surprise, almost $200,000 increase. This is still an estimate. The final numbers are not effective until next June. If, as we're told by DESE, the governor's supplemental budget for FY18 is a means of raising the bar to 80% reimbursement for future years, it will further offset the district's cost of implementing single-tier elementary busing in the future. Other revenues, I talked about them at a bit of length before. I'm projecting both of those to come in at $200,000. Medicaid probably will still come in even higher than that, and if rates go up, investment earnings will probably come in even more than that. Us accountants tend to be conservative, but we're projecting, as of tonight, we're projecting $400,000 in revenue from these two sources, where just 2 years ago, the projection was zero. So we're trying to hone in on reality as far as, and reasonably so, in forecasting the district's financial position. And then JD, in his analysis of the capital projects, didn't mention that a couple of those, in particular the Blanchard paving and the purchase of maintenance equipment, was funded with FY18 money, and so we're ahead of the game there as well. The last one, change to HSA. You've heard presentations about the optional change in employee health insurance coverage to a health savings account, which offers a significant premium rate decrease to both employees and the district. Based on enrollments to date, the number of employees who switched from traditional coverage to the HSA was higher than expected. New hires are still being processed. I won't ask Marie for the count of how many are in what flavor, but their health insurance decisions are being evaluated, and will quantify the expected savings when we have a firmer handle on the numbers. So in conclusion, there's good news and good news. We have a very strong financial position, and thereby we have a great opportunity to get a better handle on accurately forecasting our projections and our future budgets. So thanks for your attention. This went longer than I had planned, and I'm sorry for that. I'm happy to entertain questions.
I got a quick one. For lower fields, aren't we at a point where we should be expecting more revenue?
Expecting what? I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't hear the very first part.
So lower fields, when we engaged in the project at lower fields, it was a public-private engagement, and if I remember correctly, there was some need of the private group, Friends of the Lower Fields, to be using the revenue to do with the pay back the loan and all that kind of stuff. I think after 7 years, they were supposed to have paid back the loan.
I don't think we're at that time yet. I think there's 2 years left. We should look into it, but I believe there's a couple of years left on it.
They're still subsidizing the loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, very good. And I'm sorry, but I also vaguely recall, and maybe I got this wrong, but didn't we set up a circuit breaker account similar to transportation? But I don't know if that's funded. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So Paul, that is what Dave was talking about earlier. So circuit breaker, prior, more than 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't fund the circuit breaker account at all. So it's grown over time, and when he talked about at the end of the year, he put more in there. The last couple of years we've been able to do that. So what you're talking about as the circuit breaker reserve is what he's asking about.
So, right, so whatever the balance is in circuit breaker, I would call that the circuit breaker reserve. It's funds that are available, and in this case carried forward to the next year.
Yeah, about this circuit breaker account. So I assume that we're not going to flow the money into that, right? I mean, except for the refund from the state, right? Because this is circuit breaker it's specifically, I believe it's specifically from the state that definition. So I'm confused by that. So.
Well, I think that as we go through the budget process, that will be a decision that we'll be making, whether we should put more into it or leave it alone or take money out of it. But
But it's only circuit breaker money that goes in there.
Right.
We
for
don't
that
take
purpose.
operating money and put it in.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. So
Yeah,
if
it's
you,
only circuit breaker money that goes in.
yeah, we can talk about that later, but if you mean, different account that will do the similar job, then you want to rename it, so. I don't know, I just,
We want to keep that funded because we don't want to get surprised with 6 kids with high needs and we don't have any way to accommodate them. So this is what that account is for.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. Yeah, I got your idea, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, first of all, Dave, thank you. I have a sort of a big picture question when we look at your first slide around the overall summary. And we're seeing that last year we came in with a roughly 2% variance, and we're looking at that again this year. I'm curious, both how does that compare to what our district has done over a longer term period, but also how does that percentage, because what I struggle with, and I think a lot of people will, is you see 1.6, 1.7 million, it's a lot of money, but then you look at the percentage of our budget, it's fairly small. So if you look at other districts or other comparable communities, are we sort of on par percentage-wise in terms of where we're landing at the end of the year?
Well, I think this, you asked a couple of questions there. You asked historically about AB and how do we compare with other districts. Historically, compared with AB, coming into regionalization, you had a very small amount in E&D. And again, this is my opinion, but knowing Claire, my predecessor, she was a very conservative sort even for accountants. And so she saw the need for some budget discipline and some conservatism in the budget and was able to build it by about $1 million a year. So does $1 million and change, and as it gets larger, as a percentage, it becomes more normalized, the amount of the dollars. As you do that from year to year, that's become your norm. So from 14 to 15, from 15 to 16, 16 to 17, that's 3 years. From 17 to 18, it would have been the same had you not taken $1.5 million out for the feasibility project and the FY19 assessment. So there's a trend of 4 straight years. I would maintain that you're in a position now where that is the norm. Compared to other districts, it depends. You get a Concord Carlisle, a Lincoln Sudbury, a relatively affluent district, they're probably able to put numbers like this on the board, so to speak. Less poor districts, central and western Mass, not the case. We're fortunate in that regard as well.
But that percentage of the budget, that 1%, is that?
If I may quote from an audit that was done several years ago, when he was kind of talking about the expenses and the budget coming in and variance of 1%, I think I'm quoting when he said we nailed it. So we're working with big numbers, and when they come in with 1%,
And we're working with big numbers, but at this point, because we're close to the ceiling, 1% now will be relevant, and without other strategic actions, creative and otherwise, it will trigger some things not in our control.
But I will say, some of it's the market too, and we're in a growing market. And there was a time where we had a higher vacancy factor, and it was too low, so we raised it, and then we got socked. And so we brought it back down. And so, it's the art of looking at where the market is and where I agree that we've been conservative, but I think with good cause, and we can get a little less conservative, but let's not go crazy, and let's remember all the capital we still have to address.
And the health insurance as well, again, way before my time, you went way in the negative in health insurance. And I sat through a lot of meetings of the trust last year, and they very reluctantly agreed to a rate decrease that everybody thought, especially a newcomer thought, this is a no-brainer, you've got the money to do it. But people remembered, but this is what happened a few years ago. And it can be that volatile.
I have a question about the slide you present, the FY19 budget preliminary bills. If we can go there. Yeah, here, if we look at other revenues, the investment earnings, we projected 200K, and then I believe that 100K is the new number.
So we budgeted 100,000, I'm projecting 2,000. All of the data isn't on there, so I'm projecting an increase, a surplus of 100,000. So we budgeted 100,
Based
I'm thinking
on,
we're gonna have 200, so we're 100 to the good already.
all right, I see, but, okay, so based on just the interest rate,
Yeah.
you know, okay, all right. Thanks.
You got one more from me, Paul, I'm sorry. And that is, you have a letter regarding student activity account balances. So 3 schools, the senior high, the junior high, and Blanchard, have checking accounts under the control of their principals under the Student Activity Fund statute. The accounts are under the auspices of the district treasurer. They're allowed to have checking accounts from which they write checks for student activities, and those amounts are replenished by funds in an interest-bearing savings account under the jurisdiction of the treasurer. They're subject to a review engagement at least once every 3 years. We've been having them every year and rotating among the different schools. What the school committee is required to do is to vote on the maximum amount called an imprest, or just amount to which they're replenished balance. And I'm recommending that we keep the same balances that were used in the prior year, $35,000 for the senior high school, $25,000 for the junior high school, and $5,000 for Blanchard. That would be the maximum they're allowed to have at any one time in the checking accounts under the control of their principals.
And you need a vote
I do.
for that. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead.
So I move to set the impressed balance of the student activity checking accounts for the 2018-2019 school year consistent with the prior year as follows. Senior high school, $35,000. Junior high school, $25,000. Blanchard Elementary, $5,000.
Second.
Thank you.
Recommendation to approve the FY19 assignments and subcommittee members. Do we have anything to discuss here? We talked about this at an earlier meeting. So we're ready to vote in the package of proposed list of assignments and subcommittee members for the new school year. As you know, we talked about this at our last meeting. No discussion. If not, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the subcommittee assignments.
And a second? Second. With a motion and a second, all those in favor of approving the list as read, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Thank you. The assignments and subcommittee members is unanimously. Sorry. Should I read that again? The assignments and subcommittee members were approved unanimously. Okay, and 10.2, Peter, do you want to address the 10.2 here?
Sure.
Okay.
This is just a very brief update for you. As you recall, at our summer workshop, there was some strong interest in revising the existing school committee operating protocols to make them clearer, more abbreviated, and really just reflect what we had discussed at our meeting around school committee superintendent relationship and vision for school committee workings. So we did have one meeting. We took a look at some exemplar protocols from other districts. We also took a look at some research around that in our current operating protocols. We took the feedback from that. Beth has drafted a revised set of those. We're in the process of scheduling another follow-up meeting to that, where we'll review it, and then at the end of that meeting, we'll determine if we feel like we're ready or not to forward that to the whole school committee. It could be after one more meeting. We might need a second meeting to review that, but that's in process, and I anticipate that we'll be sending those to you sometime, hopefully in September.
Okay, so we have a few updates here. The first is we have selected our designer agency, and I'm going to have Peter talk about that a little bit. He was involved in that.
Thank you. So the light needs to be on. That's going to take me some time. Thank you, Adam. We went to the Mass School Building Authority, and we have finally selected our designer for the program, and that was Arrow Street Architectural Firm. I'll talk a little bit about the process so you understand what that looks like. The designer selection process is guided by the Mass School Building Authority, and they have what's called a designer selection panel. That selection panel is typically consisted of 17 voting members, 3 of which are representatives of this district. So the rest of the panel, which is includes architects, engineers, designers, consultants, and staff members from the MSBA. What happens is we submitted an RFS, which is a request for services, back, I believe it was June, and we were seeking designers. We had 5 qualified bidders who had come in on that, and the school building committee met and reviewed the written proposals from each of those bidders. We took the feedback from that, and we went to the Mass School Building Authority in July, where we met with the designer selection panel, and as a result of that, we whittled that list of 5 down to 3 qualified bidders, which included Doran Whittier, Perkins and Will, and Arrow Street Architectural Firm. And at that designer selection panel, what we asked for, and they did, was to send those 3 firms to a second round where we had an opportunity to interview them. The interview process consisted of about a 30-minute presentation where the architects provided an overview of their firm and their vision for the project and working with us. But in addition, our district was able to submit a series of questions that we felt were pertinent to our project in particular. So some of the types of questions we submitted, I won't list them all, but some examples would be, can you talk about how you would reduce energy costs and possibly consider a net zero building, yet also do that in an economically feasible and responsible way for the community? Can you talk about the educational vision for a school that might have 2 co-located schools within one that each have independent educational visions, and how could you bring that to fruition? Can you talk about, trying to think of another big question that we asked.
We asked about the space, like the wetlands.
Yeah, wetlands. Yeah, you know, we know that all of our sites include wetlands on site. Thank you. And we asked them to talk about advantages and considerations that they might have for that, because we wanted to really get a sense of which firms could best meet the needs. All 3 architectural firms had fantastic presentations, and I think we would have been, pleased working with all 3, but I think what we found was Arrow Street was by far the most responsive to our questions, and yet also laid out the most exciting vision for what they could bring to our community. What we found through that process is, above all of those firms, this was a firm that had spent countless hours doing research on the values of the community, the core values of the school district, the individual cultures of some of the schools involved, and were able to really present that in a way that showed they had some serious significant interest in working with Acton Boxborough to develop this project. And that was To me, that's always the number one driver you want. You want a firm that wants to work with you and wants to help your district and your communities achieve its educational vision. And they really hit it out of the park. We were thrilled to have them on board. The designer selection panel process was wonderful. Even though the numbers don't work in our favor in a designer selection panel, I can tell you, and I think if JD was here, and I think Marie would say, they were incredibly responsive at MSBA to the desires of our district to do this. One advantage that we as a building committee thought may have been a disadvantage for Arrow Street was their significant work on charter schools and maybe a little less work in public schools. As we got through the MSBA process, and we actually heard from some MSBA staff members, our view of that changed significantly, because in the charter school world, when you design a building, there is a fixed cap, and it's usually significantly lower cap than what public schools have available for funding. And Arrow Street consistently worked in that type of an environment where they had to deliver a high-quality performance product at very, very economically and affordable prices for their charter school partners. So we think that's actually a great combination for us. They also have experience doing some net zero buildings in Cambridge. They're working on one right now. And they're also working regionally in the Harvard public schools, building their new school at the moment. I was able to talk to the superintendent in Harvard, and she had glowing reviews of Arrow Street and was thrilled with the work that they had done. So we're thrilled to have them on board. They came to the building committee that we had Tuesday night, and they presented an overview of that project. I think people generally left very pleased. And we're already trying to start the process of getting this building project underway. So more to come, and we will certainly keep you updated.
Thank you, Peter. I would add, from our meeting on Tuesday night, so we're now starting the feasibility work. What you will see is movement on the educational plan. So there will be, the community will be invited for input. There will be some visioning work. It won't completely repeat what was done with Doran Whittier, but we'll build on that. So people will be invited to that, the community, school committee as well. They will also start assessing the buildings. So remembering that MSBA requires us to look at a renovation for Douglas, a new build just for Douglas, and then we can look at our twin option. So they will be assessing, and in our request for services, we named Douglas, Gates, and Conant. So Arrow Street is obligated to look at all three of the buildings, and again, they will build on the Doran Whittier work, but they will be doing that, looking at each school. I also want to mention that JD brought folks from Eversource, which is the electric company that Acton uses, to the meeting. They have a program called Mass Save, which we have used in the district. They're required by law to take some of their profits and put it into this program to fund energy efficient projects. They are starting a new initiative. They've been working, they're hiring a consultant who's worked with other types of organizations to be involved right at the building design stage so that energy efficiency can be brought in from the beginning. And perhaps, I mean, they said at no extra cost. That is what I heard. I questioned, you know, and they'll also do a cost analysis and show us what are the cost savings over time. And Eversource is interested in trying this with a school building. And MSBA is very interested, Arrow Street is interested, Skanska is, and we are. So we will likely do a partnership with Eversource through this program as part of what we're doing. So it's very exciting, really good work coming forward. So keep paying attention. We are going to work on the website a little bit so that it's clearer, and we'll really start reaching out with some of our social media as well. We need to add a member pursuant to what we just voted for committees. Maya Minkin would like to join the school building committee, and so we are the appointing body for the school building committee, so we need to do a formal vote. So I'd love to have a motion to add Maya Minka as a new member to the school building committee.
And that language, I think we have on the table?
No, that's for the next thing.
Yeah.
I move to appoint Maya Minkin as a new member of the school building committee.
Second.
Any questions?
No questions? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous.
Great, thank you. And then we do have a disclosure of financial interest on our school building committee, so Peter's going to address that for us.
So I'm going to try and do this as clearly as possible and give you all of the accurate information, but in a concise way. There's a memorandum in your packet that outlines the issues around this, but we received a disclosure form from one of our building committee members. Her name is Katie Raymond, and she's been on the school building committee for quite some time. She's an engineer, which brings a wealth of knowledge in the building process to this, and she specifically works on environmental projects. As we selected Arrow Street, it became clear that one of the subcontractors that was identified by Arrow Street is her employer. And so she recused herself initially from the process, and last night she did not, Tuesday night she recused herself from participating at all in the building committee meeting. But under Mass General Law, that can be considered a conflict of interest, and so someone would have really two choices in that case. They could either recuse themselves and resign their position on the committee as a municipal employee, and it's a non-elected municipal employee in this case, or they can elect to fill out a disclosure form that outlines the nature of their employment and what that potential conflict could be. That form is included in your packet after my memorandum. At that point, it's up to the appointing authority to read the information included in that form, consider any other information available, and make the appointing authority has ultimate deciding authority to determine if the information disclosed about that individual presents a significant enough conflict of interest to preclude the individual from continuing participation. So, what I want to also do is give you a little bit more background information that we received since the building committee meeting. You have the disclosure form, and essentially what it's saying, Katie is an engineer with the company Epsilon Associates. What we know, and the architects presented this to us at the building committee in public forum the other night, and then this is also confirmed in a letter that I received from Katie. But the role of Epsilon Associates is limited to working on environmental permitting processes through this part of the project. The exact scope of it is yet to be determined, but it's limited to environmental permitting. Katie's role in the company is as an employee. She's not an owner or a partner in the firm in any way. She's a salaried employee. And what she did is, after the architect on Tuesday night presented us with the scope of the firm's work for Epsilon Associates, Katie went back to her supervisor and brought that information with her, and she confirmed for me via letter that her managing partner at the firm has excused her from any work responsibilities related to this school building project. So again, just to highlight some of this, she filled out a disclosure form indicating what her role is and potential conflict. We have confirmed the scope of the company's work, which is limited to environmental permitting. We've also confirmed that she's going to be excused from any work related to this project, and that she has no direct financial interest in the company related to this project. So she is not a partner or an owner in this firm and is not in any way benefiting financially. So what we're asking you to do is to consider and determine as an appointing authority, and it was the full school committee, just as you just appointed Maya a few minutes ago by vote of the school committee. You appointed Maya as a member of the building committee. It's also your responsibility to take the information related to Katie and determine if you believe it's a sufficient conflict that she either can or cannot continue her participation. What we chose to do, because we know this is a little bit complicated of an issue, and this was something that I did substantial research on prior to this. I have been able to speak to a general staff member at the Attorney General's office about the specific issue here, as well as an attorney in the office of the AGO, so that I could also run this by them. Typically, they do not talk to someone other than the person who submits the form. However, I was able to get a little bit of information on the process from them, because I told them I was a representative of the appointing authority, and I was looking for advice on behalf of the appointing authority. So they did give me some more information than they might typically give out. And essentially, I then talked to our own attorney at Stoneman, Chandler and Miller, it's getting late, And they confirmed for me that the school committee as a body is the appointing authority. And so what would happen is, if you vote to continue her participation, you would then authorize either the chair or vice chair to sign that by virtue of the vote. And if you vote not to continue the participation, Katie would need to resign her position on the committee and it would not be able to continue. I hope that's a clear presentation of what the two possible motions are.
I just want to add two things. I just want to note that Katie, the reason we're hearing about this now is Katie didn't know this until she reviewed the application. So her office didn't raise it with her at all or anything like that. And then second, I just want to say, you absolutely, have to vote what you think is appropriate here. But the reason why it's not just an easy let her step off the committee decision is she is an incredible member on the committee. She does so much hard work and homework and really brings a lot of education and expertise to the committee.
Michael.
I have a question for Mary. So, what's the relationship between the school building committee and the contractors? Is it like you audited their work?
Well, we approve all payment. The school building committee, so the money that was appropriated for the feasibility fund is managed by the school building committee. So her company will submit a bill to Arrow Street. Arrow Street will submit a bill to us, and we will approve that. Aside from that, the permitting work, my guess is it's going to come all through Arrow Street to us, that we won't do any direct work with them as a building committee.
So you don't really reveal their task scope, their project scope?
No, and I can take that if you don't mind. So we hired what's called an owner's project manager, and that's Skanska. They are the agent responsible because they're professionals in the construction industry, and this is what they do. They manage projects. They actually oversee all of Arrow Street's work and confirm that it's done accurately and appropriately and on budget and on time. That's their role. We've hired them to manage this project. They're independent of all of this. They report back to the building committee. So they're overseeing the project for us. Beneath them is the architect and designer for the project, which is Arrow Street. And then Arrow Street has a number of subcontractors, probably 24 subcontractors that work under them. And for the environmental permitting portion of this, that's what we're talking about, Epsilon Associates, of which Katie's an employee. So there's really numerous steps along the way and checks and balances in place.
Okay, so the school building committee supervise that project manager, and project manager actually supervises the entire project, right? So the members of the school building committee actually each member is the boss of that project manager, right? So
yes, and
so there is a indirect interest conflict there because she's the employee of that contractor, and then she's the boss of that, the project manager who's actually supervise those projects.
So
right.
That's why she submitted the form.
Right.
And that's what this committee is tasked to deliberate.
Yeah, I just tried to clarify the whole thing. Yeah,
absolutely. That's the reason she submitted it.
Okay,
One thing
she
also said is, and which she would do anyway and have to do, she will be abstaining from any deliberations or votes that pertain to the environmental permitting portion of this project. So, which she would have to do anyway. But that's her intent, and she's put that in writing.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, we're working on this is the feasibility budget of 700 and whatever thousand.
Right.
Or 1.2, I'm sorry, right, 1.2. But I gotta believe that the environmental is not a huge proportion of that. We don't have a scope, but just, I work in the environmental field, and I don't see a lot of issues. I mean, I think we're talking phase one. Did they discuss any kind of potential work? I mean, I imagine they need to do a phase one evaluation.
Still to be determined.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is a question for Mary. So I understand Katie is on the building committee, right? So without her, what is where we can gain the same value, the same knowledge that we originally get from Katie?
We'd have to find a community member who is an environmental engineer who doesn't work for Epsilon or any of the other subs on Arrow Street if we weren't going to have Katie continue.
If I could just say that I think that the process as set forth is very thorough. I think that we have all the facts that we need, and I think that we're benefiting from the volunteer services and extensive knowledge of a community member who has done everything correctly in terms of making this disclosure. I don't see, I work on General Law Chapter 268A, which is a state conflict of interest law. I don't think that this is a problem. She's not going to have any input on the scope of work for her company. She's not going to have involvement in that. You know, she's not going to directly benefit from it. It was just happenstance that it's not like Arrow Street had a leg up because of her or will have any untoward advantage. So I'm happy to read this motion, and if nobody else wants to.
Yeah, but I'm more worried about the influence. This because she's the employee of one contractor, and then she's the boss of that project manager. So I'm more worried about this influence. So although it's indirect, but I worry it's not about
Adam, just a minute. So I just want to point out, though, we have a letter from her boss at her company saying she's excused. So that's, in my mind, that is something that we can rely on that makes it. I would hate to lose this volunteer.
But I just want to point out that although she might excuse all the votes, but still the influence is still there. So
Adam.
I disagree a bit, Michael, because she's only one member of actually a fairly large committee, and so it is the committee that is the supervisor of Skanska, the owner's project manager, and so the influence that one person may have isn't that great compared to the committee as a whole.
And especially her, having disclosed all of this, so everybody is aware of this. I don't see how that's potential, especially with all the layers in between the building committee and this subcontractor.
Are we ready to vote? Any other questions?
Sure. As appointing officials as required by General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 19, I move that we have reviewed this matter and the financial interest identified by Katie Raymond and determined that the financial interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the school district may expect from Ms. Raymond as a building committee member. As a result, I vote that we authorize Paul Murphy, the school committee vice chairperson, to execute the disclosure form as the appointing authority.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? And abstentions? And one abstention. One no and one abstention.
I believe, as Mary told us and everybody tried to persuade, I definitely believe Katie is a very valuable member, but I did hear from Ginny. However, I really have some concern to see the very clear process without any doubt, anything, so I can't decide. That's all.
But I think the motion passes with the exceptions. Okay.
So those are just other materials for your your information. So we're done. Thank you.
So we're moving on to, well, school committee member reports. So, okay, yeah. Diane and I met with the ALG. It was just kind of a preliminary meeting to kind of get to know each other. There are a lot of new members, set maybe some ground rules, and just map out our what we plan to do in the next year. So that's all it really was, is introductory. And we have a BLF.
So the BLF met last night, and of note, we have our special town meeting scheduled for September 5th, and it's at the Regency, which is different from normal. We usually have it at the Blanchard School, but it will be at the Regency at 7 p.m., and it's primarily just for 2 warrant articles around marijuana sales.
Okay. Item 13, we have a recommendation to accept gifts to the school district, and we want to vote. Peter, do you want to take that?
Sure, I'm going to read these both together. If you would like any additional information or questions, just say hold after I read each one. The first one, I'm recommending your acceptance of a gift of $5,250 from Acton Boxborough United Way for scholarships to Community Education Summer Day Program. And I'm also recommending acceptance of a $4,000 gift from Danny's Place Youth Services for Community Education Leaders in Training Program. And I want to also say that those are both with deep, deep gratitude on the part of the district.
Thank you, Peter. Is there a motion to accept these 2 gifts from the school district?
So moved. Second.
Right.
Move to accept with gratitude.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That passes unanimously, Beth. And item 14 is FYI. Peter, do you have some highlights there?
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few things, and this is actually information that we're going to also be including in my weekly update or bi-weekly update to families tomorrow and on our website. But 14.2, I just want to remind everyone, if I didn't say it 2 or 3 times already, we have new start times for all of our schools in the district. We need families to pay attention to that. The bus schedules have changed. If anyone has missed that, we'll point that out one more time. We also are including the parent communication map. That's been updated for this current school year. I think coming in as a new superintendent, one of my deep hopes is that we provide outstanding customer service to all of our students and families, and I think as part of that, it's really important that we can resolve all conflicts and questions and issues that arise in the most efficient way possible. So we do ask families to follow the communication map, because what we know is conflict is best resolved and questions are best answered by those closest to the initial point of origin. So thank you. Third, actually, we just want to highlight that we have our financial assistance letter. That's an important resource for all families who may need access to programs and services in the schools. And then I also want to make sure that as a school committee, you are aware that you are invited to our opening day for all staff, which is Wednesday, August 29th at 8:00 a.m. in the newly finished ceiling of the high school auditorium. So you can stare up and gaze at the ceiling if you get bored listening to me. So that's it for my FYIs.
Yeah, and that's Tessa, go ahead.
Peter, with respect to the school times, I had asked a number of times, and it still isn't included, the RJ Gray and high school early release times, because there was parents asking for them, and they're not still on our updated time list.
Sure, there's actually no need for an executive session tonight, so we're not holding that. We anticipated that there was pending litigation that we wanted to update you with respect to strategy. That litigation has been resolved, and there's no need for the meeting tonight, so no executive session.
So I think we've gone through the agenda. The last item is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And abstentions? Beth, you got that?
All right, thank you.
Very good.